Have you ever written about things you've done? Do you like to make a newspaper for you and your friends?
They didn't tell me either. I can't really write it once. It says, what is he supposed to be doing with them?
It's fun to make play newspapers, but how would you like to see how a real newspaper is made?
Yeah!
Welcome to the Big Newspaper! Our adventure begins here in Arlington, Virginia, across the river from Washington, D.C. This is the home of USA Today, the biggest newspaper in America. They sell over 2 million copies every day. The paper is a very busy place. There are over 400 reporters, artists, and editors who put out the paper 5 days a week.
What's in the paper?
The paper has 4 sections. The first one is the front section. This is news. It tells about events happening in the world, in places like Washington, D.C. The next section is money. It tells about business and has stories about saving money and spending money. The third section is sports. This section tells about players and scores and fans, everything about every sport. The fourth section is called Life. It's about fun things like books and movies, and also about things like health and travel.
Cool!
Each section of the paper has its own newsroom with hundreds of reporters and editors. Newsrooms are very busy places. At the newspaper, almost everyone works at a computer, and they're all connected together on a network.
What's a network?
A network allows people to share what's on their computers with someone else. Reporters can send articles, pictures, and email all over the building and all over the world. In the newsroom, everyone tries to make their computer something special.
With USA Today.
Hi, it's Karen Peterson at USA Today newspaper.
Some reporters spend a lot of time in the newsroom. Other reporters have to go out to distant places to find their stories. This is Mel Antonin. He's a baseball reporter for the sports section.
Brian, this is Mel Antonin. How are you? Good. I got just a couple quick questions. I'm putting together this story on Ken Griffey Jr., as you know.
Sometimes he works in the newsroom, and sometimes he's on the road.
One of his high school coaches, Joe Hayden, told me.
Today he's in Miami for a baseball game.
My job is to go to as many baseball games as I can, and I go to the ballpark every day, talk to the coaches, talk to some of the heroes from the day before, looking for stories, talking to players, trying to keep up with the trends. John, 3:19, I'm in the pro player press box. I'm going down to the Mark McGuire press conference.
Sometimes there's a press conference when something important happens.
I've come a long ways.
Mark, in spring training, you said that let's not talk about 60 until someone gets 50 in September.
And it was one of my goals. And I still truly believe if somebody got to 50 by September, they honestly have a real shot at trying to break this record.
But you have to remember that your obligation is to the readers. You have to keep thinking that the people who are sitting around the next morning asking the questions, those are the questions you want to ask. You're here as a representative of the fans. If a fan thinks this, then it's a good question to ask Mark McGuire.
Thank you, guys.
Before the game, Mel goes out on the field to watch batting practice and to get interviews for his story.
I would have thought, based on what I saw last year,
You get to know the players, and you have to draw a line. You can be friends, but then you're also journalists covering them as players. Sometimes you have to write things that the player might not like, but you have to remember that your obligation is to the readers.
At the stadium, Mel sits in the press box, a special section set up for reporters to watch the game. While the stands are still empty, Mel checks in with his editor in Washington.
I don't think it's a good match because otherwise. Well, that's what I mean. Then I'll lead some of the stuff with McGuire. What are you talking about? Because I'm on TV. Hey, good. Thanks.
Tonight's game has begun. The press box is now full of reporters, and Mel has a lot to do. He watches the game, keeps score, writes a story, and sends it out on email to the paper to make the deadline.
You know, there's a lot of work to do. It's not just sitting there having a soda and eating a hot dog and keeping score. There's a lot of things to consider. I can be in Cleveland one night or New York one night, but I have to keep a beat on what's going on in Kansas City or Texas. So there's a lot of phone calls, just a lot of things going on. And sometimes the game becomes secondary because you're so busy with an early deadline, an international deadline, and a late deadline. And so you don't enjoy the game so much like a fan, but you still have to think like a fan.
It's a busy night. During the game, Mel sends out one story on email while he writes another.
Fans need to know what's going on in the field. You have to picture, for instance, if something happens in a game, if it's a home run, every fan in that stadium, 46,000, and fans all across the world want to know what's going on. We're the fans' representative, and we try to answer every possible question. It's like coming home as a kid from a high school basketball game and telling your dad what the score was. You know, he asked you what the score, who won, how many people were there, who did you see, all that type of stuff. What I do here isn't any different than running home from a baseball game in the middle of the summer and telling my dad what was going on.
Every day, there is another game or another story he has to follow. For Mel, sports is really something special.
It's really a dream. I grew up playing baseball, trading cards, reading statistics, listening to the radio, and now I'm actually going to those places that I dreamed of as a kid, and so that's pretty exciting.
Okay, paper today. Let me start with the years.
Every morning at 10 o'clock, there is a special meeting at the paper. This meeting is run by Dave Mazzarella, the editor of the paper. He is helped by Bob Dubill, the executive editor.
Okay, it's a Ricky Byers. Pretty good variety.
What's an editor?
Editors are in charge of choosing the stories that go in the paper. At this meeting, editors from all the different sections meet to go over yesterday's paper. They talk about what they did right and where they need to do better.
Little Daily News front page is pretty good story. No one guessed that those was going to hit 2 in one day, and he did it. So we should have been more nimble on that. Okay, other papers?
The editors also talk about how other papers reported the day's news.
The New York Times story was really much better, but they had a reporter, obviously, in the hearing.
Then it's time to look at how tomorrow's paper will look. Dave asks for ideas for the front page and writes them on a large pad.
I know we got a couple left over from yesterday, right? We got
Yeah.
the plan
And
what else was
the
it?
fund story. Albright flies out there tomorrow and comes back with them.
The news meetings are basically an exchange of ideas. Editors or representatives from each section attend these news meetings, and we basically talk about what's going to be in tomorrow's paper.
How is that happening now? Is there a news
conference planned for later on today, and I'm there, and
I think the responsibility of an editor is to deliver the best newspaper that we can deliver, and that involves bringing the staff together and having them working as a team.
After this meeting, editors return to their departments, where reporters are already busy, working on the stories of the day.
What does a reporter need to know about a story?
A reporter always tries to find out 6 important questions. Who? Who is involved in the story? What? What exactly happened? Why? Why did it happen? When? When did it happen? Where? Where did it happen? And how? How did it happen? A reporter must ask these questions and more to write a story for the newspaper. In this storage room, full of thousands of computer games, is Mike Snyder, technology reporter for the Life section. Mike tries to make sense of new technology and new products.
This is Mike Snyder over at USA Today. Oh, I was trying to talk with someone about DVD and DVD-ROM. What I do is I cover the news in the audio, video, and technology industry, and then I also try to give our readers kind of a customer service by picking reviews of different software, video games, and some other multimedia CD-ROM, and then also internet. Okay.
Mike explores the internet to find new sites for his readers.
There might be a news event happening, or a sports event, or something happening in the world, and I'll go look on the World Wide Web for websites that have something to do with that. So I look at those sites and try to point out the best ones to people who read the paper, and then they can find things easier.
Mike also reviews hardware and software and new entertainment products. In his job, he gets to try out the latest stuff before it hits the stores.
I can cover anything that plugs into a wall, basically, whether it's TVs, whether it's video games, whether it's computers, whether it's VCRs. So a lot of times I talk to the company first that's coming out with the new products and say, well, what is new about this? What is cool about it? And that's really what I write about, the cool stuff. If I'm interested in it, I think our readers are going to be interested in it.
After Mike tries out a new product, he then works to find out more information.
It looks to me like the Fox releases are kind of at a little slightly higher price. The more sources of information, the more balanced story you're going to write. If you only write with one source, it's obviously from that source's point of view.
For every article, Mike has to do a lot of searching, sort of like detective work, over the phone and on the internet.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to talk with me. You need to gather a bunch of information about a topic and then condense it and put it in an easy to understand form for a reader. So when they get done reading that story, they can say, oh, that's what this is about.
As Mike writes, he checks to see what his story will look like when it's printed in the paper. When he finishes writing his story, Mike sends it over the network to his editor. The editor reads over the story and makes suggestions to Mike. Sometimes they meet and talk about how it might look.
I haven't fixed that United network. It's not molded. Yeah, before you close it, it's weird.
Here is Mike's story for the Tech Extra section of tomorrow's paper.
Sure.
They check out how the story looks on the page. The next day in the paper, you can see how the story turned out. Cool!
I grew up reading the paper every morning. I think I just gravitated to it because I like to learn, and basically that's what I do every day. So I come in here and I decide what I'm going to write about, then I get to research it. And in effect, I'm writing a research paper every story I write in the paper. And I like that.
A paper is more than words. It also has pictures. These can be photographs, illustrations, maps, or diagrams. This is Dave Merrill. He's a graphic artist. He He creates pictures to explain the news. Today his assignment is to create a snapshot.
What's a snapshot?
A snapshot is a picture with a graph that goes on the front page of each section of the newspaper. Dave has to make a baseball snapshot for the sports section. To get ideas, he checks the internet for the photo archives, which has hundreds of thousands of photographs. He looks through lots of images until he finds the one he likes. Then he goes to work. Watch! There it is, the final snapshot. Dave now sends it to his editor for tomorrow's paper. The next day, the snapshot is in the paper. This is James Healy. He is the automobile editor for the paper. Jim's job is to drive new cars and write about them. Cool.
I cover the auto industry and I'm a product specialist, so I do a column once a week evaluating a new car or truck. When I turned on the air conditioning, it made a really loud, ugly noise.
Jim's column is read by people all over the country. So, Jim wants to make his column as useful as possible.
It should give the reader a sense of whether the car is suitable for what that reader would like to do with it.
Car companies deliver new cars to Jim's house every week. Today he gets a minivan.
I go out and take the keys, check it over to make sure there's nothing obviously wrong with it. And then I get inside and try to do another check around to make sure that it looks okay inside, like it's not broken, that it's going to work all right for me.
Sometimes, Jim has his son Patrick help him with the job. With a dad like Jim, Patrick learns a lot about cars.
That's right. I like to look at the engine, like to check out the trunk, all the features of the car as much as I can before I drive it.
But the most important part of Jim's job is to actually drive the car. It's also the most fun.
Then I drive it away and just drive it in a normal way, usually around my neighborhood to work, and see how it works in those conditions. And make up my mind whether it's a good car or a bad car or an in-between car based on how well it seems to do regular things. Sports cars, of course, are a lot more fun, and I have a particular fondness for trucks, too. I like big four-wheel drive pickup trucks. That's one of my favorites. That and sports cars are probably my two favorite things. Once I've driven it enough to make up my mind about all the things I think about, then I'll just get out of the car, race into work, and just start writing. I want the impressions of the car to be as fresh as possible, because that's usually the most honest impression that I can give.
Jim talks to car companies and other experts to find out extra details.
I got my van today. I did. It shows good. Go up to 2.
He always tries to write articles that are fair.
But I have a couple questions about it. I understand that in some early testing that nifty tonneau cover was blowing off in crosswinds and that more work was going to be done in the wind tunnel. I want to know how that came out. A journalist needs to be as accurate and fair as is humanly possible. Oh yeah, the old pre-production excuse. Oh, there's the trim panel on the gate. Well, even when I give my opinion about something in the car reviews, I still try to be as fair with that opinion as I can be. I try to make sure I'm not just picking on something. And when I was a kid, I wanted to work on cars. I wanted to be an automotive engineer. I sort of accidentally got hooked up with people who worked for the college newspaper, and so that's how I got started working for newspapers.
Jim really likes writing about cars.
Please, that would be useful. I like cars very much. I think cars are a wonderful thing, and trucks are a wonderful thing, and they have freed up the country tremendously. They can cause problems, but by themselves, they're wonderful machines.
At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the editors meet again with Bob DeBill to go over possible stories for the front page.
My job is to make sure that we have all the stories we need, that we're breaking news, that the headlines are correct, that the snapshots are in the right places, that we have the right stories. So it's trying to manage a staff. We have 410 reporters, editors at USA Today.
But we've sent her there just because it just looks like that's turning into such a story.
It would be nice to think.
Bob updates his list of stories for the cover. This is very important because the cover page is what makes people buy the paper. It's what they see in the vending racks. The editors keep a rack in the room just to remind them.
Where do the racks come from?
The USA Today vending racks are made here, near Nashville, Tennessee. Watch. The editors continue to discuss the best stories of the day and why they are important.
But in terms of a chase tonight, or the late edition, we should figure out some format to tell you at a glance what happened around the world.
But the news doesn't stand still, so Bob can't put together the front page until very late in the day.
Where are we?
We are out in the country with newspaper photographer Dar Beiser. Dar takes pictures of the sports car that Jim tested. He finds just the right spot and takes lots of pictures from many different angles. Dar uses a special digital camera so he can check to see how the picture will look. He moves the car to different locations to get the best shots. Later that afternoon, back at the paper, Dar takes the disc from his camera and loads it into his computer. He looks at all the photographs and chooses his favorites. Then he labels them and sends them through the network to the photo editor, who selects the shots for the article. Next, the photos come here, to the retouching department. Rick Williams is a photo imaging specialist. His job is to make all the photographs look as good as possible.
Well, we either receive digital images or film. The editors select the exact frames that they need, and we scan them in and process them for the paper.
Rick works hard to make sure the photos look their best.
We're working on the fastest machines, the latest software, But now you get to a certain point where, you know, you want everything to be better than before. So now you look for any mistakes that you have made or any techniques we can use to make the image look better.
Rick has always wanted to work with photographs.
One of my earliest memories was of my aunt taking pictures of us in the backyard. And, you know, that pretty much started everything for me because she took us through the whole process. We developed film in the house. You know, it was just amazing to think back now and see how much of that I like to do now.
When Rick finishes with the photos, he sends them through the network to the layout department.
What's a layout?
The writing and pictures in a newspaper are called the layout. The big type on top of a story is called the headline. The rest of the story or article is called the body. The type underneath the picture is called a caption. And the type that tells who wrote the story is called the byline. This is Susan Haas. She is a design editor.
My job is to take the photographs that the photo editor has chosen, that the photographer has shot, and to take the story that the reporter has written, and to put them on the page in a way that makes it appealing to look at, that makes it something that people want to read, and also that makes everything fit.
Sometimes Susan has to lay out the story before it is finished. So she uses nonsense words called dummy type to make the columns for Jim's review. She has to work fast because the review will be in tomorrow's paper.
Sometimes we don't have very much time to be doing a page or to be doing a lot of pages. We have a very short amount of time that we can use to really make things work. Hey Jim, this is Susan. How are you? Good. I know that you're writing about this BMW today. I don't have any of your copy yet, so I'm going to do the layout with dummy type. Can you tell me what you wrote? Deadlines are an interesting challenge. They are something that we face every day, so it's neat because we always get to start all over again every day. Get it straight. Okay.
Susan enjoys her job and has always wanted to work in a newspaper.
My mom was a journalist. She started as a reporter at a newspaper, and my parents met at the newspaper, and we always had lots of newspapers in the house, so I started reading them when I was very young. Well, that one is... I think I have the best job at the whole paper. It's fun. There are a lot of really neat people here, and a lot of people of very diverse backgrounds, so I feel very lucky.
When Susan finishes her layout, it is combined with other layouts and then sent to the production department and then on to the printing plant.
The printing plant?
This is a USA Today printing plant in suburban Virginia. Right now, everything seems quiet on the outside, but there's a lot going on inside. Workers get everything ready to print tomorrow's paper. They check the giant rolls of paper called newsprint. Each roll weighs almost 2,000 pounds.
Wow, it looks like a room full of trees.
This one printing plant will use 30 rolls of newsprint to make tomorrow's paper.
Where do they come from?
Newsprint is made from trees, like these near Montreal, Canada. The trees are chopped up, mixed with recycled paper, and loaded into this machine, which turns them into giant rolls of newsprint. USA Today is made from over 90% recycled paper. The rolls of newsprint are then sent to printing plants all over the country. USA Today has 33 printing plants in the United States and has other printing plants in England, Germany, and Hong Kong. This is the White House in Washington, D.C., the home of the president. Susan Page reports from the White House almost every day. Cool!
Every day is different at the White House. Some days you might cover a news conference or go on a trip with the president, or you might go cover an event in the Rose Garden. You might be writing about foreign policy or domestic policy or gun control. All those different issues come to the White House.
Today, Susan covers a presidential speech in the White House Rose Garden. There are lots of other journalists from around the world. Susan is well known. She has been covering the White House for 18 years.
There's a lot of friendship among the reporters who cover the White House because we see each other so much. We see each other in the morning, we go out to lunch together, sometimes we go on these long trips together. So we know each other pretty well, and we're a pretty friendly group. That doesn't mean that we don't compete with one another, because we do, and we all want to be first with a story or best with a story. But it's still a very friendly atmosphere.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President and the Vice President of the United States, accompanied by the Attorney General and Jim and Sarah Brady.
When the President has an event, I go and stand there and try to, first of all, watch what the President does and listen to what the President says. Both things are important. What he says, how he looks, who is around him, what they say, all those are important things to be noticing.
That's why I have said that I'm proud we're going to have the first balanced budget and surplus in 29 years, but I don't want us to run right out and spend it before we take care of the crisis in Social Security that is looming when the baby boomers retire.
Like most reporters, Susan always has her notepad handy.
I take notes all the time. I take notes when I'm talking to someone or when I'm watching something, because that's the way I can be sure when I'm writing the story later on that I get the quotes accurately or that I remembered things properly.
After the main event, Susan keeps working to find out more information.
If there are other people there, I might try to talk to them, members of Congress or members of the Senate who are there. I might go try to interview them about what they think about what's happening that day. And sometimes I would go to talk to officials at what's called the stakeout position. There's a place in the White House driveway where cameras are set up and officials can come out and talk to reporters, and they often do that, especially if they've been visiting the White House.
Thank you.
Susan stays very busy, and she must keep up on current events.
The briefing that Assistant Secretary for State for Administration Patrick Kennedy gave last night at the State Department.
There's a briefing every day at the White House. The press secretary and sometimes other officials come out almost every day to answer questions on whatever questions reporters have on their minds. The issues the White House wants to talk about, but also the issues the White House doesn't want to talk about.
But how concerned is the President that on 2 or 3 occasions Ambassador Bushnell asked for help and it was ignored?
Every day, just about, you have a chance to ask an official anything you want.
PJ, the President had a meeting with his foreign policy team yesterday. Is he going to meet with them again today or later this week? What's the
question? I'm not aware of anything coming in.
After the press briefing, Susan goes back to her desk in the White House press room.
After an event is over, I talk to my editor about what the story is and what the paper would want to run about this story. I go back to my office, I make other phone calls trying to get more information about the story, and eventually I sit down and I write the story.
3276.
In her reporting, Susan tries to make sense of the day's events in a way her readers will understand.
A reporter goes to things and watches them, talks to people about them, and comes back and tries to tell the rest of the world about it. Write it down in a story so other people can see and hear and smell what they saw that day.
Being a reporter is something Susan has always wanted to do.
When I was in the 7th grade, I started working for my junior high school newspaper, which I liked a lot, and I've liked working for newspapers ever since, and I really never wanted to do anything else. I love being a reporter. I like everything about it. I like going to things and seeing them, and I like coming back and writing about them. And I like it when I see my name in the paper the next day. It makes me feel proud. A journalist has a lot of responsibilities. A journalist has a responsibility to be accurate in spelling names and in telling what happened. That's the first and most important thing. And a journalist also has a big obligation to be fair. On almost any story, there are 2 or 3 or 4 sides, and a good story has to give a fair chance to all the different sides of a story that there are. It can't just take one side. So I think it's not just a fun thing to do, but also something that's important to the way our democracy works and our whole country works.
Right now, I have a 120-line story that doesn't say a lot of stuff that I'd like it to say.
In the late afternoon, the editors meet one last time with reporters to talk about what stories will be cover stories in each section of tomorrow's newspaper.
But the impact could range.
This is called the bullpen.
So I should expect to see more of these by the end of the year.
When most workers are heading home, the USA Today building is full of people working on the paper. The layout team puts the final touches on tomorrow's paper. When they are done, they send it to the production department. Here, each page of the paper is printed out on clear film. Some pages have to be printed 4 times.
Why is that?
Full color in the newspaper is printed using 4 different colors. First a black layer of type, then a yellow layer, then a red layer called magenta, next a blue layer called cyan, and finally black again. When these layers are all put together, they create all the colors.
Cool!
When the films of each page are done, they are sent here to the Network Operations Center. Earl Griffiths takes each page and puts it in a special kind of fax machine. This machine scans the page and then sends it to the satellite transmitter. Then Earl double-checks the page to make sure everything is all right. He then calls on a special phone that's really like an intercom.
Attention all sites. Please load
His
your
voice goes to all the printing plants.
7A
He tells them to get ready for a satellite feed.
primaries for 7A.
At the printing plant, the feed prints out film in a special dark room. When the pages are processed, a team of layout artists put each page together, layer by layer. They double-check to make sure everything lines up perfectly. Then the film pages are taken to this area. Here they are placed on top of special metal plates and sent through this plate maker. When they come out the other side, all the information from the film is now on the metal plates.
Cool!
When the plates are done, they come here to the printing press. It is as long as half a soccer field, and it's almost 4 stories tall. Press operators place the metal plates on large rollers on the press. The press has 4 giant sets of rollers, each with a different color: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Downstairs, below the press, other workers move the giant rolls of newsprint into place. There is a special conveyor built into the floor that helps them move the newsprint to the press. Other workers thread the rolls of paper through the rollers in the press. It is now after midnight. When everything is ready, the head pressman starts up the machine. Slowly at first, to make sure everything checks out.
Look, there are no words on those papers.
The first papers off the press always need correction. So press operators make adjustments in the amount of ink. Everyone on the crew checks the papers to make sure the colors line up and the printing looks good. Workers load new rolls of newsprint throughout the night. They splice it so the press never stops.
What does that dial mean?
That shows how many thousand papers are printed every hour. Tonight, this press will print over 150,000 papers.
Wow!
This is where the paper finally comes alive. Until now, it was only on computers. Now it's a newspaper. The press automatically folds the sections and sends the finished papers up an overhead conveyor belt to the shipping area. Here they are stacked and loaded onto trucks. Some papers get special stickers. They'll be delivered to hotels, airlines, and restaurants. Early in the morning, before most people wake up, drivers deliver the paper to all the USA Today racks across the country. At the same time, in thousands of cities, the paper is delivered to hotel rooms. So, every day you can pick up the paper and see stories by Mel and Susan and James and Mike and over 400 other reporters and artists and photographers and editors. They are the people who work together every day to create the big newspaper.
I think people read newspapers to know what's coming. They like to know what's going to happen in the future. They like to know what happened yesterday, what it could mean tomorrow, and that's what we try to do.
You get to see historic events take place. You get to be right there and see history being made. And then you also get to try to tell people about it in a way that's understandable to them.
We, in effect, are the eyes and ears of the public, and in a democracy, that's almighty important.
My dad always taught me as a kid to read newspapers, and one of my fondest memories of my dad is always getting up in the morning and reading 2 or 3 newspapers. It's very fun, but imagine a day without newspapers. It's hard to believe. You wouldn't know which movie to go to, you wouldn't know how your twins did last night, you wouldn't know how the Mariners did. I mean, there's so many things that a newspaper does for society. I can't imagine being in a society without one.
You subscribe to a newspaper, you get a new one every day, and that's kind of fun. And fun is a big part of it too, I think.
Every day is a challenge. I think it's the best job on God's green earth. I think the 2 noblest professions are teaching and journalism. You're trying to educate the country, the community. You're trying to get the community to think. Sometimes you're reporting history, sometimes you're reporting spot events. All of those things make this an exciting job. Sometimes I wonder why you get paid to do this job. It's so much fun. It really is.
I use math skills all the time, which I never thought I would have to use. I have to add a lot and subtract and do a lot of division because what I'm trying to do is not only make things fit, but I need to make sure that they're on the columns correctly, so I use a lot of math.
There are things I studied in school that I thought I would never need that come in handy. Things about history or political science, or things about the weather or math. So there's almost nothing I studied in school that I haven't used at one time or another as a reporter.
And I had very, very good teachers who were very strict about using correct grammar and spelling and punctuation. And they would challenge us and they would ask us, well, why is that so? Or why do you think that? And they'd let us know there's no wrong answer, we just want you to think.
Start a diary. Each day, write something on a page at the end of the day, and then try to put a headline on it at the end on that page each day. And a headline is reducing the day to 3 or 4 words, and that's tough.
You have to know your English, you have to know your grammar, but it'll come back to you, so, you know, I say study hard.
Here's how you can find out more information about topics mentioned in this video. Use your computer and look up these websites. And remember to check out the Little Mammoth website at www.littlemammoth.com.